All right, so we are now live. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And let me see here. One second, Lily. I don't see it, but I don't know. I don't know
That's
who's.
fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So I'm here tonight with Lily Wildfire. Thank you for joining me, Lily, to talk about this. I think it's a very important topic. I'm seeing it a lot online on social media, but I do like that I'm also seeing some people kind of like speak out and say like, hey, you can't, say that these people don't have indigenous blood, but these people do. Um,
Yeah,
and just calling out colorism and racism and things of that nature. So I'm
that's good.
excited to have you here tonight to discuss this. So,
Well,
do you,
thank you for having me, Dominique.
yeah, definitely. Is there anything you want to say before we get started?
There has been a lot of lies, the same way a lot of lies were told about people here in the USA. There's been a lot of lies that were told in the Caribbean islands like Haiti and Cuba and that there's been a lot of lies. So we have to consider those things when before we start judging and just basically act like colonizers. We have to consider there have been a lot of lies, and we just have to keep that in mind before we judge and disconnect people from their heritage and their land.
Absolutely. Okay, so the first thing we're going to touch on tonight is indigenous spiritual systems. Um, a lot of times when people think about like Haiti in particular in the Haitian Revolution, they just think of, oh, these Africans rose up and that's the narrative that's told. Nobody says anything about indigenous people that were there. The narrative is that indigenous people were all killed off, but we know that's not true. So can you just share a little bit about that?
Indigenous people were not killed off the same way indigenous people were not killed off in the US. Okay, so that right there should just clear that up. And also, there were already indigenous people on that island, and I don't see how people think they all died because even in the history that the French wrote, they have that in history that indigenous people and then the African people came together, and that's how they were able to fight and win. So I don't know where they found the information about the indigenous people being killed off. That's not even possible. You can't kill off indigenous people because you're here, your family's here, you guys are still alive. So why would indigenous people in Haiti be dead and gone?
Right. And that's a really good point. That's a really good point because we see certain other people, who say, oh, we're Taino, we're this and that. Nobody, few people will deny them. But when it comes to that part of the island, the Haiti portion of the island, people are like, oh, yeah, there's no indigenous people there. Like, that doesn't really make any sense. And like I've said, and I'm going to share this now, I said it on the last live that we did together that there were Kusabos. Okay, so that's my maternal side. Kusabo from the coast of South Carolina that were enslaved and taken to Haiti. Before Europeans came over here, there were already Mayans on the island of Haiti, Quisqueya. There was already Mayans there. And then you had the different Arawak groups that were there. Taino, I think there was Wanatabe, I think was the name of another one. And then I even believe there were a few Caribs that were on the island. So it has an indigenous presence. Natchez, who were in the territory of like Mississippi, Tennessee, that area, some of them were enslaved and taken there too. So it definitely goes to show that there's an indigenous presence on the island that people don't know about and are pretty much ignoring.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, you mean to tell me all those different tribes just died off? I mean, because you named at least five. So how can all these people just died off? It just makes no sense. And I feel like the issue a lot of people have with Haitians is because of our darker complexion. I feel like that's what it is. It's because we're darker skinned. I guess these people actually believe what the colonizers make them believe, that indigenous people were these pale, light skinned, or white passing people with straight hair. So, in a lot of ways, I think a lot of the people who call themselves indigenous, they're really, really whitewashed too. Because how can you deny anyone that land when there are dark skinned indigenous people? Like, what the hell? We're on the island. We turn brown.
Right.
We
Right.
turn brown. We're outside. I
And
mean,
the area that
the
you're
sun
in
feeds
too.
us.
Right. And the crazy part is, it is known that it is documented that there were dark skinned people who had thick hair that were in the Americas too. People act like it's only in Africa. No, there's people of darker skin tones with thick hair that were in Asia, that still are in Asia. Um, and there were some people in Europe. I don't know too much about that history, but there was definitely darker skinned, thick haired people in the Americas. And I do agree with you that that narrative comes from colonialism. It comes from
Yeah.
colonialism. If in the book America by John Ogilvy, which people like to share, but I don't think they've even read one chapter in the book, it's over 600 pages long. But he says, and this is, them documenting what they saw when they got over here, he says that there were indigenous people in the Americas who had hair from very fine to curls in the extreme. Curls in the extreme would be very so called kinky, curly, thick hair. Furthermore, if people actually do research on Tainos who are on the island, you will see that it says Tainos had coarse hair. When you type in the word coarse on Google, coarse hair, look and see who comes up. Who has coarse hair? So these are things that aren't talked about um, at all. You know what I mean? So it's
Hmm.
just, it comes from, again, the European colonial narrative of looking down on people who have more indigenous features, people who they couldn't breed out, you know. Um, up here in North America, they had laws they passed where if you were 1/16th native, you could identify as native as long as that 15th, 16th, you were majority European. So it's that same thought that remains in people's head when it comes to indigenous people over here. And it's just really ridiculous and it's just really sad. So
It's beyond whitewash. And I think anyone who's claiming to be indigenous, like, you have to just get away with all that and just start from a clean slate. Because telling me that somebody's too dark, how can somebody is too dark skinned or too dark brown to be indigenous? That makes no sense. How can that be when we are brown people and we come in different shades of brown and dark brown? So how can somebody be too dark? But they're not too pale. They're not too pale, but then they're too dark brown. So it's whitewash.
absolutely. So let's go into the spirituality um, that was on the island. And, you and I have had these discussions before in regards to kind of like the erasure of the indigenous presence in regards to spirituality um, in Haiti. And especially in regards to, the Haitian Revolution, people don't really speak of the indigenous presence in that.
It's crazy that they don't, because there's so much history saying that they work together. Like the people, they had to work together. And as far as the spirituality, from the indigenous religion and whatever religion they created to free themselves, it was based on nature. Even when they try to demonize voodoo, that's nature. that's basically using herbs. You're using herbs and nature to put spells and make things happen. So again, it's a bunch of people who have been colonized and just been whitewashed to believe anything that brown people do, anything that indigenous people do is evil. So they kind of like pretend indigenous people weren't involved. They pretend indigenous people didn't fight. And yes, they had to fight because that's their land. We're going to always fight for our land. So they did
Right.
fight. They were involved too. Everybody took part in that spiritual system, but that's something where they hide that under the rug and just say, oh, the Africans, they call on Satan and they made a pact with Satan. And that's it. And just everybody just believed they made a pact with Satan and we call on the devil and then we won. And that's not the case.
So I do have a question when you said it's documented in history that the people came together. Where is this documented? Because a lot of people don't know this. Up here, at least in the United States, they don't know it.
I'm gonna okay, every time we do these videos, we always have to do like a second one and a third one. I'm gonna find it so that way when we do another one, you can have that information.
Okay. Okay. So do you think that it's because I know that I was shown like a history book in Haiti, so I don't know if they teach that in the curriculum there, the presence of indigenous peoples and things like that. But um,
There's
yeah.
still a big presence of like people that but and the Haitians call them Indians. They don't call them indigenous. They call them Indians and they have their celebrations and everything still in Haiti. So, and then you have the Haitians who call themselves they don't have straight hair, but they call themselves natives.
Mm-hmm.
They have kinky hair, they call themselves natives. That's one thing they're big on. They're always like, native, they're native, they're native, but they don't have straight hair. They have coarse kinky hair.
Right.
And then you do have the people they call Indians,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have straight hair. So you have different groups of people who all call themselves natives to that land. And you
Right.
can't tell them they're Africans.
Right. Okay. And that's known there. Like that's in
Yeah,
Haiti.
that's known. People don't like I think with the whole African move and Black Power move, they took that to Haiti, but
Mhm.
we didn't call ourselves African. We're Haitian.
Okay.
The same way Africans don't claim Haiti either.
Right. Okay. So I get that. And when it comes to like just certain things within the indigenous, uh, I guess within the spiritual systems, what are some certain things that you know for a fact, like, are that came from indigenous people within the spiritual systems?
I think most of it came from indigenous people because it's all about nature. It's giving homage to nature. Like you're not supposed to kill. But again, with mainstream and people doing what they want to do, they change it around. But the original form of our spiritual system, you don't kill animals. Everything you use you give homage to the trees. They believe there are spirits that live in the trees.
Right.
Um, they dress the trees up. They give homage. They don't cut the trees down. Every animal, represent some type of spirit. Like I was telling you, my when I went to visit last week, my friend, a butterfly was in the hotel room, and
Mm-hmm.
the butterfly came and like made a circle around her.
Mm-hmm.
But she wasn't. She said she was scared. She knew it was some type of like magic into that, but she wasn't sure what it meant. When the butterfly, she said the butterfly touched her chest 3 times. It went around, it touched her chest 3 times, and she pushed it away. But she wasn't sure what it meant because, again, they've lost the connection to what it means. And then later on, we found out that was one of the spirits that was trying to protect her from what was going to happen that day. So it's based. And nature, the trees, the animals, everything represents something in nature.
Right. And with that too, what people fail to understand is that when it comes to understanding things and the connection to nature, that has to be an indigenous thing, because you have to connect with those plants that are on the island. How
Yeah,
else would, even, if Africans were brought there and mixed in, they still had to be taught by indigenous people, okay, this is what this plant is, this is what this plant does, because they're not going to have
hmm,
that knowledge. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah, yeah,
that's something too that people don't frequently think about. And even those who like were victims of like slavery that happened and were moved away from their land, to them, even if, let's say, like I said, Kusaba were taken from South Carolina coast and taken to Haiti, they're not going to know what plants and things are there in Haiti, because they're not in the same area. They would
yeah,
still too, even them being indigenous to America, they still would have to learn from the original people there what those plants do and what they mean. You know what I mean? So
exactly. That's a good point. That's a good point because even though the land is very close, a lot of the plants that I knew in Haiti, it's I don't see them here. Like there's a it's like a walnut, but it's not a walnut. It's called labapin. That's one of the things I wanted to eat. And because I know we can't find it here. You might find it in Miami, which is South Florida, which is closer to Haiti, but up north, Florida, you cannot find it. So that's one of the things I wanted to eat while I was there. And I kind of brought a little bit of it back and I gave some to my family, and everybody was so happy to be able to eat it because it's not something we find here. Tamale, that's another one. Like I see it here and there, but it's there's a lot of plants that I used to eat, a lot of fruits and vegetables that are not here. So the indigenous people, like you said, had to be the one that taught them how, what is what, what's poisonous, what's not, how to mix it together.
right. And another thing I wanted to say too is, when you have indigenous blood, it's kind of like it comes back to like your memory, like your genetic memory, so to
Hmm.
speak, to where you can sink in like, okay, this is this, okay, and then it just kind of flows after that. So I don't know if I explained that right, but
Yeah, you do, because we are our ancestors. We
yeah,
are. And people think it's just about your looks. It's about what you crave, what you want to eat. Like Alan, I don't even know what it's called over here, but it's basically the fish, and they do something where they smoke it, and we make patties with it. I ate some Alan. It's hard to find here. So when I went to Haiti, I had my Mambo sister. She made me Alan like 3 days in a row, and I was happy. I was eating good. Yeah.
right. So let's get to our next point about power, and how whenever it comes to um, you know, let's say Taino people, or all the people that were on the island, all the indigenous people that were on the island who fought back and things like that, it's like, oh, they're evil, they're this and they're that. But whenever you see, uh, Caucasian people, you see colonizers who deal with magic, or even the movies, that's big. The media with them is really big
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. That's not viewed as evil. That's viewed as, oh, cool. They have magic powers. They're witches. They're this,
Yeah.
they're that. But when it comes to brown skinned people, when it comes to indigenous people, it's like, oh, they're um
Wicked.
they're wicked and they're evil. And that was done up here too in North America, to where indigenous spiritual practices were actually outlawed. Like you couldn't practice up until very recently, I think. And those freedoms to practice um, religion, indigenous, religions,
Mm-hmm.
came from the fighting that we did down here in the Southeast during the civil rights movement. So after that, all indigenous people were able, and people don't know this, but after that, the American Indian movement was created. And after that, um, the natives on the reservations were able to have their powwows. It's because of what we did down here. So even at that time, the practices were demonized. So can you talk a little bit about just how people view, Haiti and they call the spiritual systems evil and things of that nature?
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the laws, Marionette, I
Can
Googled
you
her.
explain? Because people don't know what a luai is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm used to talking to you and we just go over a whole bunch of stuff. Um, Alua is, people spell it Loaolwa. It's basically what people who practice like Ifa, they call it in Orisha, but it's basically a spirit, and that spirit comes from the universe. It comes from God and from the universe, from whatever, people want to call it. I call it the great cosmic mother, Mother Earth, whatever. So what a law is, um, their spirit, and they can connect with people, and you can call on the fire law. It's fire. So when you connect with the fire, you can eat fire. You're not gonna get burned. You can step on fire. You're not gonna get burned because you become one with it. That's what a law is. So when I looked up, which basically spirits or the spirit of whatever it is you call, um, when I looked up Maginette and Google search, I gotta clear my throat for this one. It said that they believe she was the one that started the war at the time, the battle to go against the French. She was the one that started it. She's the one that started it, and she was violent. They said she was violent.
I have a question about that
Hmm.
and I can't remember because I do remember reading about Marinette a few years ago. Was she the spirit, or was she like the person who was under the influence of a spirit who sacrificed the pig that started off that ceremony at
Well, it's
Washington?
it's actually one. You become
Okay,
one. Yeah, you
right.
become one. But I found it interesting that in their Google documents, they said she was violent. So you're telling me you're enslaving people, you're killing people, you're raping women and children and men, you're stealing our resources, you're enslaving us. They used to like cut them up when they find them practicing their spiritual system. You're abusing and doing all type of shit, but us fighting back, we're violent. We're fighting back and defending ourselves. So it's interesting how they demonize people, a whole group of people who decide to fight for their freedom and take their
Right.
land back.
Right. And they were doing that. They were, raping Arawak women on the island and things of that nature
Yeah,
before the Haitian Revolution.
yeah.
Like when they first came on the island, they started enslaving, killing, raping, all of that. But then it's like, oh, if you rise up, you're wicked.
You're violent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember being in church because I grew up in church. I remember being in church where the pastor basically said that the Haitian people are cursed because we called on the devil. And I'm thinking, what the hell did you guys call on when you were doing all the raping and killing and genocide and stealing? So it's interesting how they flipped the script and made it seem like the people who defended themselves and fought back are evil, and then they don't mention what they did. They don't mention, their character. So I just find that interesting. Oh, I can't hear you, Dominic. You're on mute. Okay.
Sorry. When you say that when it comes to like being able to access, unseen realms in regards to tapping into, um, this power in order to, rise up or just connect to, sacred spaces or whatever, that if white people do it, it's considered a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And but when people of color do it, it's considered a bad thing. And would you
Yeah,
say that the media, especially in today's time, like the influence the media has, plays a role in that?
it does. It does. I think a lot of people are not really trying to heal or do their own research. They're kind of just they want entertainment, and the media knows that. So they always try to find a way to make it seem like, oh, this whole white magic and black magic shit. Like, what the hell is black, white? There's no such thing. Magic doesn't have a color. It's not
Right.
good or bad. But it's interesting how white magic is, oh, it's good, and then black magic is evil. It's
I
just
call
like,
it word craft. That's the word craft.
yeah, the shit just, it just never ends. And it's gonna take people who claim to be indigenous to work on these things. Instead of worrying about me being too dark to be indigenous, ask yourself why you're giving praise to Caucasian people for doing the same shit you
Right.
demonize people who look like me
Right.
for doing.
Absolutely. Um, so let me see here. Can you talk about how, like, some different practices that you know for a fact are not just in spirituality, just period, that are practiced in Haiti or that were practiced when you were growing up in Haiti, that are definitely not African practices, but are indeed indigenous? You made a few.
I can name a few, but I feel like I because like I was telling you, I don't it's like I don't have a problem with African people, and I
Right,
just hate, I just hate to be where I feel like, oh, okay, like we have a problem, or I have a problem with African people. So that I want to make that clear.
right,
But first of all, no one in Africa claims Haiti. Haitians, we don't try to go to Africa to live. It's like we we're if anything, we're gonna go to Cuba. They'll go other places, but it's like we the practices and the things that we know, it would like we are told that this is from the earth. This is what your great 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 mother practiced. This is what we practice. I was never told. None of us were ever told, oh, this is what we do in Africa. Like never. We're not. Oh, Miss African affair. We like, huh? What? No, that's never been a thing at all. It's always been this is what we do as Haitians. This is what we do as Haitians. And I believe my ancestors. I believe them over random people, on social media. I
yeah,
believe my
colonizers.
people. I can't. I mean, I guess I can go over different practices, but I don't
Well,
want it
I
to
know
be
one
where like,
thing. I don't mean to cut you off, but one thing that I noticed too in the spiritual systems, how they use the maze to draw out the veves on the ground.
yeah,
And I thought that was like interesting because they're not using, like that's definitely from here. Um, Certain foods that you all eat that are from, over here. So if you could kind of share those, that would be great.
food. We
Like
do.
the cassavas and
What happened?
the cassava.
Oh yeah, that's the kasab is basically yuca, and we boil yuca. We eat it with sauce. They also make this type of like flat bread with it. It's like a crushed up yucca mixed with different things, and they make it like really, really flat. It's like a flatbread. And we eat that. I didn't really know if it was something indigenous people here ate until you mentioned it, but that's a big thing in Haiti, like kasab. We call it kasab.
Hmm.
That's a big, big thing. I
Yeah,
had
that's
some
eaten
when
in the
I left. It's
Caribbean.
really good.
In the Caribbean, they y'all eat that
Yeah,
because
it's
it grows
big.
there. So
Mhm.
I said it's from there. It's from that area in particular.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to think what else do
I
I
also
can't
want to
think
say
of.
something else while you're thinking
Hmm.
is that a lot of times what we naturally do, no matter where you're from, a lot of times what you naturally do is what your ancestors did.
Yeah.
So it may not be like, oh shit, I didn't know that was this, because it's something that you've always done. It's in you to do it because
Mm-hmm.
it's an indigenous thing. It's something that your people have always done. Just like my people, um, Cusabos are from the coast. My family loves fish. That's something that we've always eaten. Being a coastal people, you're right there by the
Yeah.
ocean. You know what I mean? So you're going to eat fish and trade with people inland who don't have, may not have access to it. So it's certain things like that that you just naturally do. You may not think like, oh shit, my ancestors did it, but it's like, no, your ancestors have always done it. So I just really want to
Yeah.
stress that whenever you all are having these urges or these hungers, like, or you really want something or you really want to do something, that's your ancestors. That's something that your people have always done.
Yeah.
So I want to make that clear. Your ancestors will give you signs and just stuff that you don't even think about that you're doing is stuff that your people have always done before even coming in contact with colonizers.
That's true.
So
That's so true. And it's amazing because I know the food that I wanted to eat, it was like a craving. I was like craving it so bad. And then when I had the food, I just felt so much better. I felt like I fed my ancestors because I'm like, wow, I'm over here eating Chick-fil-A, but I really want almusal en casa and avocado. That's what my spirit really wants. So
right.
yes, I agree with that.
And do you feel like too, like when you were in Haiti and you were eating those foods, that your body felt better? Because I remember a few years ago, and this was back when I was pregnant with my first son, and I was craving like venison, like deer meat, so bad. I was like, I got to get venison. I got to get some venison, and I ate it, and it's just like my body was like, yes, like
Yeah,
yeah,
it felt good. I felt lighter. I wasn't like I didn't although I ate a lot when I went this last week, but I didn't feel bloated. I didn't feel like big. I didn't feel it just felt good. And I know that was my ancestors, my spirit needed that. It's like to touch the land. And there's another thing too. I've been here forever, but whenever I go to Haiti, I get so rejuvenated. I come back with a whole different type of energy. That's my ancestors. That's my land. It's like I come back and I'm alive again, you know, just breathing the air, touching the ground. And Haiti is one of those places where a lot of Haitians don't even want to go there. A lot of people are scared to go because of everything that's going on.
when you say
That's
Haitians, you mean Haitian Americans. A
Haitian
lot of Haitian
Americans.
Americans, they
Yeah.
don't want to return.
Yeah. A lot of Haitian Americans don't want to return because they just see it as too much going on, whatever situation. But with me, I felt alive. And like I told you, I had to come back to handle some stuff, but that's where I wanted to stay. I felt alive there.
What would you say to people who are, you know, oh yeah, he's Brave Coldwater said venison deer meat is great. It is great. I love it. I love it, and I love like just the wild taste. I prefer it when it tastes wild because yeah, but yeah, it's amazing. But what would you say to the Haitian Americans, right, who live here, or who were probably born and raised here, that say, I don't want to go back, and there's this going on. They're looking at the media, and they're seeing
Yeah.
all of these things. Can you share, like, what would you say to them? And if you could just share something that you feel comfortable enough sharing about when you went back, because you were just there, and we know
Yeah.
what's going on in the media with the Haitians at the border and things of that nature. We know how it's being portrayed with the whole thing of the kidnapped missionaries and all of these things that are being said. What would you say to all of that and to the people, the Haitian Americans who are afraid to go, and even people who
Mm,
want to visit Haiti but are afraid to go?
okay, so for the Haitian people who lived here, I feel like they struggled in Haiti and they came here for a better life. They came here for work. And they once they got here, they're making their money, they're able to pay their bills. But especially the ones who came here as adults, most of them, their heart is for Haiti. They do want to go back. And I feel like with them, I understand the country's going through a lot right now, but they have to support and just do as much as they can to help. They have to give back. They can't just expect Haiti to get better while they're here, not helping or not giving anything to those they left behind. They actually have to put in the work if they want to, I guess, benefit from whatever change they want to see in Haiti. They have to do the work. Um, and I feel like we shouldn't listen to the news the way the news portray Haiti. You would think, like, my family called me, everybody was so afraid something happened to me, and I'm just like, okay, I'm fine. Like, everybody called me and they're telling me how brave I was. And I'm thinking, I'm brave for going to my land where I was born, my ancestors' land. I saw a bunch of people in Haiti. I didn't see people dying in the street. I didn't see people, like, it's people getting up every day, working, making something happen for themselves because there is no government assistance. There's no food stamps. There's no cash assistance. There's no housing assistance. Nobody pays for your children's school. So every day they wake up, they gotta make something happen that day. Like, that's the magic in it. And call Haiti third world, whatever people want to call Haiti. At the end of the day, a lot of people in the US wouldn't be able to survive without the government stuff. So before you guys judge and say all this crazy stuff, ask yourself, would you be able to eat and pay your bills and do all that if the government wasn't helping you? Because you see somebody in Haiti and they're doing good on their own. Like, they have to pay for their children to go to school. Um, I guess some people might say, well, what type of government is that? But it's, what can the people do? You got to feed your children. You got to feed your children. Yeah, the government, should the government help you feed your children? I don't know. But I feel like the people in Haiti who are doing everything on their own, um, they can survive without the government. They can make things happen on their own. They're the ones doing the real work because they are providing for themselves and they are doing it on their own. Um, for people who do want to visit, with me, I didn't want to go to the tourists. They do have cruise ships that go there. I didn't want to do that. I wanted the real experience. If you do have Haitian friends or a Haitian person and trust, and they have families there, I think you should go with them and have the real experience. Except, I mean, instead of being in a cruise ship and getting off in a section of the island where you're just going to be spending money and buy a whole bunch of stuff and not really experience the culture. Haiti is still beautiful. There's so much magic there. The every day somebody can get up and take care of themselves and their children. They're happy. The children are happy. That's magic. That's life, and that's real.
And I want to bring this up because this is something I've thought about. I like, would you say that the reason why um it's kind of like this colonial media, colonizers are still trying to attack, Haiti and portray Haiti in a certain light. Um, I feel like, and I don't know if you would agree, that it's because you all have more indigenous blood. And people say, oh, it's because, I've heard some people say, oh, well, it's because they're African and all of this stuff. But to that, I want to say, well, there was Africans that were taken to other parts of Latin America. I don't even know if Haiti's considered part of Latin America,
We're
but
not.
yeah,
Haiti's not
so
considered
there
part
was
of
Africans
nothing.
taken to Latin America. So why aren't those different places being targeted to the extent that Haiti is? And to me, that shows that there is indeed more indigenous blood um, among you all, because if people pay attention, like I brought up the law earlier that was passed in regards to you could identify as native up here if you have more European ancestry and admixture. People who are more mixed with Europeans, they tend to leave them alone because it's like, okay, we've infiltrated your bloodlines, we've subdued you, you're going to do what we say now, yada yada yada, because it's a genetic war too, and people don't
It's a
understand.
genetic war. Yeah.
It's a genetic war. These people have passed laws, and I talk about this on my TikTok, um, to breed indigenous people out, because their whole thing was kill the Indian and save the man. It doesn't look like they were too successful in Haiti in particular, in that part of the island, with that. And so to me, just from an outside, person looking in, I feel like that is another reason why they're trying so hard to go at Haiti and to portray Haiti in this light, missionaries, they're kidnapping missionaries and all of this stuff. What do you think about that? And also, what would you say about the whole missionary being kidnapped issue?
Oh gosh, the whole thing about them keeping them attacking Haiti, it never ended. They attacked the shit just never ended. People think, oh, because the whole Haitian Revolution, it was over. It was never over. They continue attacking us, and I feel like every every 5, 10 years, they find a different way. Like they were trying to set up something for COVID-19 um, places in Haiti. Then we had an earthquake. Every time they try to do something, something happened to the country where it kind of like stops everything. Um, the fact that all these different indigenous people were taken to Haiti and then all the people there, I feel like Haiti was like the melting pot of indigenous people. It was the melting pot of indigenous people, and it
Right,
still is. And I
right,
believe that's how we became Haitians.
right,
And it's not, it's almost like every time they try to do something in Haiti, something bad happens, and the Haitian people get upset and start burning shit up. It's restless, and it's beautiful, and I love it, because what that means is those ancestors are still alive, the energy is still alive.
right,
And I don't believe they're going to be able to do the things they want to do. And it's not because we're Africans, because hell, supposedly you guys are Africans here too. So I do believe there's more indigenous. We were able to, the location where Haiti is, and Cuba, all that, all those islands in the
mhm.
US, I believe there was just like, we were just a big melting pot of indigenous
Yeah,
people.
we always travel back and forth. Before
Yeah,
Europeans came here and started enslaving and taking people here and there, we always travel back and forth. The Southeast, in particular, which is where I'm from, um, was basically like that too. It was people of Arawak descent who were, and that's, my Gustavo side. It was people of Arawak descent who were in Georgia, South Carolina, that region, even Arkansas, because there are some indigenous names of places in the area now known as Arkansas that were Arawak names. Also, there's a Mayan connection with the people who are called the mound builders, the Mississippians, and things of that nature. So it's like we've always traveled back and forth, just as people travel today. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? You may move to a different state or whatever. That has always happened. But I've noticed it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't think of indigenous people in that regard. They act like, oh, we all stayed in one place. We never stayed in just one place because, one, you would deplete the resources in that area. We understood that we have to move to give the resources in that area time to regenerate after we've used them, time to renew
mhm,
themselves after we've used them for a certain period of time. So we move somewhere else and then we may come back later. So I just wanted to share that.
yeah. And I think people forget, people really don't know Haiti had a lot of interest here in the US for the Louisiana Purchase, just a lot of stuff the Haitians were coming here to do.
Can you
And it's
share a
like,
little bit
why
about
would
that?
we do all
Because
that?
people don't know that. Could you share a little bit
Yeah.
about
Why
that?
would Africans come over here and fight? Why would Africans come and have any interest in what's going on here? It's like, no, they were going back and forth. And I feel like what had something happened where people were in Haiti coming back and forth, and then maybe when the war, that energy came through, some people stayed, they didn't really travel, and then they kind of stayed there until something happened. But I believe Haiti is the melting pot of indigenous people, and that's why. It's a constant
That
attack.
they weren't able to successfully dominate.
Yeah, you can in Haiti you can tell the mulattoes. They're obviously mulattoes. Like there's not a whole bunch of people who are mixed with all this stuff. You can tell the mulattoes. You can tell it's like you can tell who they are because their complexion. They basically the mulattoes in Haiti look like Spanish people, what we call Spanish people, Puerto Ricans or light skinned ones. That's what they look like in Haiti.
So they look like
And
me.
then you have, no, really, that's what
I
they
said,
look
so they
like.
look like me.
No, 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 no. You act like I've never met you in
I'm
person.
just
I know what you
joking.
look like. No, 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 no. No, they look like the Spanish people with like straight hair, pale. That's what they look like. It's obvious when you see a mulatto, you can tell they're mulattoes. So there's not a whole bunch of that going on. They stand out. I feel like people in Haiti look so different. Nobody in people don't look like me. Like people, everybody looks so
There's different
different.
phenotypes. Not
There's so
all
many different
Haitians look the
phenotypes there.
same.
That's how I know it's
Yeah.
different people.
So
There's so
it's
many different
interesting too.
phenotypes. And everybody looks so different. Everybody have they're not all dark brown skin. There's different shades of brown.
Right.
I feel like not with this light on, but my natural colors, like I'm a darker tone copper. There's a lot of that there. And then you have the different people with different complexions. Everybody looks different. So you can't say they're all one people. And I
Right.
feel like it's because we are one big melting pot of just indigenous people, and that's how we became Haitian.
That's good. That's good. So, is there anything else that you would like to share in regards to maybe just the culture, some things that you think make Haiti unique and make it kind of stand out from other areas? I wanted to bring one thing up, but I was like, no, we kind of already touched on it, but that just kind of really pissed me
What
off.
is it? What is it?
The whole thing about the hair textures, that really upset me, but I think we kind of already touched on it a little bit. I was gonna
Yeah,
go
that's
deeper,
just
but
whitewash, white supremacy because
yeah.
it's like um we weren't limited to certain places. Like people, my complexion, my hair type, we're all over the fucking world.
Right, all
So
over the place. So yeah, it was stupid. That just really pissed me off. But do you have any closing things you want to say just about just kind of like for people
yes,
who
I
are
do
like
actually.
especially around this time when people are feeling like, Thanksgiving's coming up and things like that. So people, there are people who get depressed around this time of year, just everything like that. But also the fact that you have people celebrating indigenous genocide, and the fact that island was the first to experience that interaction with colonizers. What would you say to all indigenous people to kind of like give hope and something of that nature before we close out?
I guess I could say we're here. Um, we made it because you're here, I'm here. I know you and I are indigenous. We made it. Our ancestors are very much alive, and we weren't killed off like they're saying. They try to find images to replace what we look like, but we weren't killed off at all. We're still alive, and I guess free your mind, free yourself, and learn who you are, and don't listen to what colonizers have to say about your people because they're not friends. They're not your ancestors. If anything, they're going to try their best to make you believe they've conquered and they've killed all of us.
And
And
that you're
I
not
know
on
for a
the
fact
land.
that's not true. I know they didn't kill us because I'm here and you're here.
Right.
So,
And, also things will ultimately work out in our favor. It's no coincidence that at the same time that indigenous people of the Americas in particular are waking up and breaking the spells of colonialism, their false teachings, you know, that they put in media. It's no coincidence at the same time we're waking up everywhere, all across the Americas, that the planet is also waking up, and the planet is also rebelling against the beasts who destroy her.
It's
Because we are,
beautiful. I'm happy. Like, it's
yeah, and we're
beautiful. I'm not
connected to the
stressed out.
planet. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that just shows that we're connected to the planet, because it's like everything's happening at one time. So everything, I feel like is ultimately going to work in our favor. And we just have to make sure that we are doing what we can to restore ourselves, and also to protect the planet from them just completely destroying everything.
Yeah, they don't have the type of power. I think they just made themselves look like they're so powerful. They've destroyed this shit. And then they're like, oh, these people didn't look like that. They're all gone. It's like, meanwhile, I see you. I'm here. When I go to Haiti, I see all these damn indigenous people in Haiti. So we're here. We're here. Like, believe in, I guess, believe in yourself. Don't believe in what the people who try to destroy you tell you.
Right.
Why would they be honest with
Right. And also know that you're not alone. Your
you? Yeah.
ancestors are with you. You may be the one in your bloodline who was woken up, and your ancestors chose you to change
Yeah.
things around for the better for your bloodline. You're not
Yeah.
alone. I'm somebody like that. Lily, you're somebody like that.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to restore things for our bloodline, for our lineage, for our
Yeah.
people.
And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Lily, for joining me tonight. And I hope you all have a great night. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.